Hello. I was wondering if I might trouble you for a cup of strong black coffee, and in the process engage you with an anecdote of no small amusement.
Hello, Herd. I'm very loud.
You are, but it's okay, because I still love you.
God bless your ears tonight, folks, because we've got a doozy of a show for you. And on top of that, I am very loud. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I am J-Dub.
And
And is this the first time in a month, that we've recorded together?
I think so. It's been a bit.
So I promise we still know how to sort of do podcasting, but if you came here for professional, high quality content, we did invite a fantastic guest. So you will get
Yes.
that, but not from us. But yeah, we took 2 weeks off. One was by choice, one was not. But we are back by choice, and I'm excited about that. But before that, I was traveling a lot.
You were. It was kind of awful
It
for a little bit
it
there.
did suck. It did suck not being in the Fortress of Solitude with you, which I guess is the Fortress of Duotude. But yeah, so I just thought about that as we started this off. Like, we are in the same room recording, and it feels special. It also feels special to have our lovely friend Nick from Podcast of the Wills tuning in live, and of course our buddy Charlie. Much love and good vibes to Charlie. He was supposed to be with us today, actually, to chat about X-Men, because he is an
Yes.
excellent friend. But he got the itis, and so he is recovering
Yeah.
from the itis, and we wish him well. And luckily, we're going to have lots of other things we can invite him on.
It's true.
We have no shortage of nerdy conversations, except when we do. And sometimes when we do, we pose that to the NerdyVerse, the people out there who put up
Yes.
with us,
In case you're wondering, we are the masters of the
the
NerdyVerse.
masters of the NerdyVerse. Ho!
Wrong show completely.
Oh, I know. Well, but it's our show. And so when we're looking for new and interesting ideas, we've created such a community, and we appreciate that. And we like to take advantage of that. And so we put it out into the ether sometimes of, hey, what's some things we can talk about? Because sometimes ideas come quick and easy, sometimes they don't. And when I asked the ether, the lovely Andy responded, who you may remember joined us for our episode about Solo, a Star Wars story.
Yes. They are spectacular in many ways and very knowledgeable.
They are excellent.
Can you not? Can we?
No, it's going to be all throughout the episode.
Okay.
It's all throughout the. I thought you would be on board with puns.
I was not expecting this.
You're on board now. Anyway, so Andy was like, "Hey, want to talk about X-Men?" And I was like, "You have no idea how much I do," which I never thought I'd say, but in the past year, my opinions on X-Men have changed. How much? Let's find out, because we are going to do an examination
We forgot how to
of.
spell.
Well, I forget that the camera's mirrored. You get a lot of goofs and gaffs if you tune in live, guys. If you're listening to this after the fact, I'm telling you, it's a lot more fun live. And speaking of live, we are live now with our lovely friend, Andy.
Hi, Andy.
Hello.
Howdy, howdy. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm having a pretty good time over here in Maryland.
Good.
Fun.
You haven't lost your mind planning and preparing for this episode?
Dark Phoenix almost did it.
Really?
There's some bad X-Men movies out there, and when you really love X-Men, sometimes it hurts a little bit to revisit some of the movies.
Love X-Men, honestly.
Well, that's fair.
I'm
Okay,
wrapping
I'm in between both of you on that one. I can definitely, like, if you approach it from the history, because next year is actually 60 years of X-Men since the first issue, and that's kind of crazy. But Andy, as you and I were talking about, like, when you've been around that long as a series on multiple platforms, it's bound to get weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And X-Men continuity is uh, a lot. There's a lot of good stuff and there's a lot of bad stuff, and it can be really confusing if you want to dive into the comics for the first time. So I can imagine trying to adapt 60 years of continuity into making a movie or a show. You
Sure.
really do have to try and distill it down to its core essence, and some things do that better than others.
Absolutely. Well, and it's like, so we did a series recently going through and journeying through the Batman films up to the newest one. And it was interesting reading about each film and what variety of series, some familiar, some lesser, that the writers decided to pull from. And it's interesting to see a film get made out of 6 comic series and whatnot. And of course, when you're doing it that way, not all 6, not everything in the 6 series gets in the 2 hours. And similarly with X-Men, like it's really hard to, I'm sure, choose what gets in.
Yeah.
And then with 20th Century Fox being, in my opinion, a very reactionary studio, film to film and review to review can greatly determine what happens next, for
Yes.
sure. Because I think there's some good footing in some of them, and there's some meh footing in others where they kind of just overcorrected maybe a little too much. Um, and I'm sure that happens in the comics as well. I'm gonna be upfront and say that my thing with X-Men is definitely more steeped in the films and the animated series, particularly the original, the
Yes.
90s one, and X-Men Evolutions. That's kind of my X background.
Yeah. So your expectations should be set pretty low.
I mean, it was really easy to please me with the movies, yes, I will say, but they did let me down sometimes.
X-Men Evolutions is amazing. Not to spoil my Andy's criteria for what makes a good X-Men adaptation, but I think it might be the highest ranked thing I have on here, actually.
Really?
So I very much love X-Men Evolutions.
Okay. It came in a weird era, and we'll get there because that part of what we're
Yeah.
doing with this whole episode, which lo and behold is going to be an hour of us trying to fit a lot of stuff in. So we're going to become that which we're reviewing, essentially, by not being able to cover everything to every extent, I'm sure. But part of what we're doing is kind of journeying through and examining X-Men throughout the eras and sort of the strong points, the not strong points, and the overall vibe check of each era, of each iteration. Because again, 60 years, there's a lot.
Yes.
So obviously, we've got an expert in the field with us in Andy. I've admitted I am a ex-college dropout. I've definitely not explored all of it.
You got your XCD, yeah.
It's gonna get old fast, folks.
It already
Strap
has.
in.
I'm
It
ready.
got older faster than the movie Old.
But
by M. Night Shyamalan.
Meg,
Yes.
you, hi.
Hi.
For you and X-Men, where are you at before we even dive into the overall examination and whatnot? How do you feel about it? What's your background with it?
Well, I read a couple comics here and there growing up because they were my brothers and I liked to steal their things. And I don't think anything really stuck with me. Like I can't remember any specific plot points, probably because I was young and reading so scattered. But then I realized the other day that I have seen almost every single X-Men movie in the theaters.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's a great badge of honor, but it's definitely a badge-worthy experience.
Yeah, it's like Spider-Man. I've seen almost every Spider-Man in the movie in the
Wow.
theaters. Like, it's nuts. I can't say that I enjoyed them. I'm going to be incredibly honest.
But the
here.
popcorn was great.
The popcorn was delicious.
I appreciate that you're rocking a mutant shirt, though. That's some mutant solidarity.
Listen,
Teenage Mutant
the
Ninja
best
Turtles.
Teenage Mutants out there, in my opinion. Also, Leonardo is the leader.
It's Raphael, but I'll let you have it. But y'all are that's another thing you all share though, is you and Andy the love of TMNT. If I
Love those
recall.
turts.
Petition to call them turts from now
The
on.
Teenage Mutant Needle Teetles, yes.
I'm a big fan. I think we've only talked about Secret of the Ooze on the
Yes.
show.
One of the best sequels ever made.
And so, but we'll have to revisit that.
Okay.
Are we sticking with that statement?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
The opening scene alone of that movie is spectacular, and it sets the tone for the rest of the movie.
There's no Casey Jones in it though.
I mean, I'm sad about the Casey Jones. I'm not sad about missing the actor. But I will say, and I was hoping our friend Kev would be in the comments to back me up on this.
He's lifting heavy things and putting them back down.
The best iteration, and I will take no questions on this, of TMNT is Saban's when they crossed over with Power Rangers in space.
Yeah, that is pretty good. But also
Power
the whole
Rangers,
musical tour that they
Ninja
did,
Turtles.
pretty spectacular too.
I mean, has X-Men crossed over with Power Rangers? I don't think so.
Probably not.
I wouldn't be surprised if they have. I wouldn't be surprised.
You know what? There is a lot of Power Rangers has crossed over with Godzilla, for goodness sakes. Which, I mean, Godzilla technically a mutant.
In the 90s, nothing was bigger than X-Men or Power Rangers. Like, they were two powerhouses. Sure. So
absolutely. So you've seen every movie.
Yes.
Didn't like them.
No.
Is that what we gathered from that experience?
Okay, so you guys, if you've watched the podcast for long enough, know that I don't enjoy ranking things. I like to say, did I have fun watching this movie or did I not have fun watching this movie? And I didn't have fun watching the X-Men movies a lot of the time.
That's fair. Yeah.
That's fair. I don't like ranking things unless it comes to Nick Cage movies, and then they're all at least a 1. But
can I have words?
Luckily, Andy has created a beautiful grading system, all their own, for our process. So we'll see where we land on some of those things. Maybe not so much a solid rank from you, but you can come in with the gentle touch of just like, maybe we don't rewatch that one. But I will say, I watched all the movies recently, and I have some opinions. So I'm excited to get to that.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear.
Because I'm going to be a jalapeno pepper, I am sure, in that conversation. But anyway, so part of your homework that we did not assign, by the way, Andy is just that fantastic of a guest.
Yeah.
So if you're listening, get them. They're amazing, and they will make your show better.
Please.
Thank you.
Part of your homework, you came up with the pillar eras of X-Men. And so wanted to open up the floor for you to walk us through that a little bit for a time.
So if you are a hardcore X-Men fan, you could, I'm sure, debate me on this, but I have broken the X-Men comics into 5 eras that I would consider to be the most important kind of umbrellas of X-Men eras in the comics. And if I don't mention what you consider to be your favorite, like, time period of X-Men comics, in my mind, it just falls into one of these other eras. So it starts with the original series in 1963 to 1970. It's a 66 issue run created by Stan Lee, and it sucks. Those comics are not good.
It was canceled for a reason.
They were not critically acclaimed. In that 7-year time period, there's only 66 issues. So, like, they weren't even coming out with issues every month. It's really bad. There's not much going on there. There's some cool villains, and there's a couple of, like, seeds of ideas, but it doesn't go anywhere. X-Men is then dead for 5 years until it's revived with Giant Size X-Men #1. And Chris Claremont then takes over. And the Claremont run is from 1975 to 1991, which is unheard of in comic books. The fact that he wrote the same story for 16 years is nuts. It's never happened again. This is like a standout thing in comics. And not only does it change comic books forever, but the Claremont run influenced how like stories are told in pop culture. Like there are tons of really influential TV writers who said that because they read Claremont, that influenced how they then like made TV. So his fingers are like out there and have influenced a ton of stuff. This is where the mutant metaphor comes from. So the idea of like mutants being discriminated against and being an allegory comes from the Claremont era. Stan Lee didn't do that stuff. Stan Lee loves to say that he did the Martin Luther King, Malcolm X thing, which is like a not a good allegory. And it's not great. And like Stan Lee, you didn't even do that. That's Claremont. Right. Stop it, Stan. All of your favorite X-Men characters come from this time period. All of the best X-Men stories come from this time period. The Dark Phoenix saga, the Brood saga, Days of Future Past, the Demon Bear, Mutant Massacre, Inferno. These are all like really legendary X-Men stories. They're all from this time period. It's really dope. I highly recommend reading it. After that, the Morrison era from 2001 to 2004 is short-lived, but Morrison is extremely queer, and their run of X-Men stories is extremely queer. And he really takes the idea of if the mutants are a minority group, what does their minority culture look like? And it really revolutionized the X-Men moving forward with the allegory. Like if Claremont created it, Morrison refined it. The decimation happens in 2005. Wanda, the Scarlet Witch, depowers all mutants except for 200. And there was literally like a chart in the back of the comics with what 200 mutants still had their superpowers. It sucked. And mutants were depowered from 2005 to 2019. Wanda really screwed us, y'all. Wanda really did a bad thing. She said no more mutants. This is why I hate
that. I've seen that panel, so that's what that's in reference to.
Yeah, Wanda went crazy because she was a woman with
known to do.
She was a woman with too much power, so she went crazy, and it was a really sexist storyline, and it really screwed the X-Men over, and it's because Marvel didn't have the film rights, y'all. Thankfully, though, and there are some great stories in there, though. Kieran Gillen's run is really good.
Kieran Gillen.
I personally love the Fraction and Rosenberg runs because Cyclops is great in them, and I love Cyclops. So your mileage may vary in this era, but there's a lot of good gems and there's a lot of garbage. And the X-Men was kind of dead for 15 years. Like Marvel was really trying to de-emphasize them and elevate things like the Inhumans and stuff. They were elevating properties that they had the film rights to.
Sure.
And then the current era is the Krakoa era, started by Jonathan Hickman with the soft reboot House of X Powers of 10, and it's freaking amazing. This era is really, really freaking good. If you've never read an X-Men comic, you could dive in here theoretically and get caught up fast. And the writers, Hickman's team, he's got a whole team working for him, is taking the best stuff from the Claremont era and the Morrison era and kind of doing their own thing with it now. So it's a fun time.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, and like as far as modernizing and continuing the storytelling, it's good to, because what I really don't like is series that are like, all right, we're gonna start fresh and we're gonna do nothing like the last guy. And I feel like you cut yourself off from some good things brought in and inspired by the previous author in the previous helm that could be refreshed for sure, but you don't have to always start from scratch any more than you have to redo what the last guy did. Like we don't always have to have Dark Phoenix in every reboot. you know?
You
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
You really don't.
And
S-
so, but it's like there's these cornerstones where it's just like either we don't do them because they're cornerstones, or we constantly redo them because they're cornerstones, but we never quite build on them. Um, so to find a series that it is doing that is something to jump in, support, and definitely enjoy while it lasts, because it's rare, I think.
So I wrote 5 categories that are vital to making a good X-Men adaptation
Mm.
based on
You
what I
couldn't come up
consider
with
to
10
be.
for
Okay.
X?
So 10 is the highest that it can be ranked, each category. So
Yeah.
the highest score
Ranked
is
X.
50. If you got a 10 in a category, that's a perfect score. And I did put an X for X-Men in my little chart here. I
Love you, Andy.
did a lot of number crunching. So these categories are how true to it, like how does it honor the source material?
Mm.
The baseball rule, which is the X-Men love to play baseball in the comics.
It's a great team sport.
That's why I
My
like baseball.
my like most controversial X-Men take is that the baseball scene in the first Twilight movie is the best X-Men movie that we've ever
Okay.
gotten, and the fact that it's a like 4-minute scene in Twilight breaks my heart, but that is the best X-Men adaptation.
It's the best scene in that entire series of movies.
I mean,
It's really good.
I
It's
can
really, really
believe that
good.
is the sad part, considering I know the content around that scene.
Have you never seen the Twilight movies?
No. I did watch Vampires Suck, though, starring Matt Latner, voice of Anakin Skywalker from Clone Wars, by the way.
He's been in some garbage.
He has
Yes.
been. I am so
Yeah.
glad Star Wars happened to him.
Yeah. He's really talented, but he's been in some bad stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So
Seems like
the
he has fun, though.
the baseball rule is like, do we see the characters having fun? Do we see the characters enjoying being mutants?
Hmm.
If it's just all drama and all angst, that's part of X-Men, but that's not all X-Men is.
Hmm.
How's the teamwork? So X-Men fight unfairly. Like X-Men will like fight you 5-on-1 and have no problem doing it. Like Storm will take out a knife and stab you. Storm loves knives. The X-Men fight dirty and they fight as a team. And the Avengers are co-workers, the X-Men are family.
Hmm. Oh,
And
that's
so
good.
how's the teamwork in the combat? Like if they're going off fighting 1v1 in the fight scenes, that's bad. That's how the
Hmm.
Avengers do it. That's not how the X-Men do it.
That's how the movies do it.
How's the mutant metaphor handled? So the
Hmm.
mutant metaphor can track onto lots of different minority identities, and it's not a one-to-one allegory to any of them, but things like disability, Jewishness, being a minority faith, like being Muslim, is like a newer one that's been like getting more traction in the comics through certain characters. Being a racial minority, so Chris Claremont really brought that in with characters like Storm, and then other characters like Bishop and Sunfire. Not Sunfire.
Mhm.
Gosh, I got this mixed up. Roberto da Costo. I am blanking on his superhero name, but characters like that who are black and also mutants. And then like queer identities is a big one that X-Men it's there a lot, but it's not frequently said out loud, so that can be a little frustrating. But how does the adaptation handle that sort of thing? And then the last category is it a horny soap opera? The X-Men comics are soap operas, and they're incredibly horny. And a big thing about X-Men comics is who's sleeping with who has a crush on who. This character has a
Very
crush on
true.
that character, but they told this character who has a secret crush on them, and now that person is jealous, and it's a mess, and they're all living together in a big house. And the comics are very, very horny. So if you're going to do an X-Men adaptation, it needs to be a soap opera.
I mean, I agree with that. I like
Yes.
because, and you mentioned it well with the allegory of family. There also comes the family drama, which is the best part of soap operas. Like the fact that gosh, has to be close to 20 years later, saw that Bo is coming back to Days of Our Lives, and I'm still like, oh my gosh. Like, it shows like the staying power of soap opera drama
Yes.
and whatnot. So
Well,
yeah.
that was something that Claremont did, was he would bring characters in and then have them leave and then have them come back later.
Mm,
So, like, different characters leaving the team would break your heart. You'd be like, no, like, I love this character. I don't want them to go off and, like, do something else. But then,
right.
sure enough, 9 months later, 3 years later, because Claremont was there for so long, he'd bring them back. And then it was like a big event that, like, so and so's coming back to the X Mansion. Like,
Yeah.
oh, the drama of it.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and that's something, and that's the benefit to long lasting, but also like long standing leadership, in that you get
Mhm.
to plan long term. You don't go by the week to week, you don't go by a 6 month contract, you go by, this is my grand scheme. And so I think that that's part of the thing that hasn't been replicated with X-Men. I think in a lot of things since Claremont is the longevity of things.
Mhm.
Um, and I understand it's hard to bake that in. You can kind of force it too much to where it drags on, and then it's got no interest. So no one does care when people leave or come back, or when new series eventually happen. Um, but I think there was a magic formula there where they just kind of were like, "Hey, you've got this figured out. Let's let you do your thing." And like you said, it was a course changing kind of decision, for sure, for X-Men and beyond. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I like how you mentioned, and that's the beautiful thing that I think X-Men does. Marvel does incorporate and has in its history incorporated some representation. Some people claim it was their uh, flag to plant. Some it wasn't. But the beautiful thing I think of X-Men is, at some point they decided that it is meant to represent something. It's not um, it's not necessarily up to question. Now it can be up to your experience what it represents.
Mhm.
Maybe it represents your ethnicity, maybe it represents your orientation, maybe it represents, current politics, or any number of other things, religion even. I really like actually how much X-Men is one of the only series that features religion, quite quite
Dis-
frequently.
Disability is another really big one with
Mhm.
X-Men.
Yeah, and so that's why there's never bad, well, representation for the sake of representation, like tokenism, is bad representation. That's not what I am meaning to say. But that's why there's never, because I see comments all the time of, when is it enough? When, like, don't we have, like, we've got a couple of black guys over there, we've got a queer over there, we've got two women over there. Aren't we good on representation right now? And it's like,
Mhm.
uh, well, no. There's
Yeah.
always more we can do, and there's always better that we can do as well.
And we shouldn't settle for less. Like,
Absolutely.
Andy, you convinced me to watch Our Flag Means Death, and I do
Yes.
not I recommend it so much. Oh my god. And
I was
what
in the other room. I could hear the glee, but I
y-
was not present for the
you
glee.
heard all of the giggling and all of the oh my god.
Look, I've been, and I'm just quantifying this, okay? Because somebody is going to come after me of like, why didn't you watch it?
You were
I've,
watching X-Men.
and I've been busy with Skywalker Saga.
It's true.
So don't at me, because I've just made it to the sequel trilogy,
You're
and I'm
gonna
very
watch it.
happy.
You're gonna watch it,
Oh,
baby.
for sure, for sure. But
And
anyway,
season 2 when, please?
right?
Someone tell me. Um I the prevailing thought that I had during that entire show was we could have had this for years.
Mm-hmm.
This is a show that was made for people like me. And like we what have I been settling for all this time? And you know what, Andy, you might have convinced me to read some dang comics.
So I had stopped reading Marvel comics because of a story called Brand New Day. It was a Spider-Man story, and I hated it. And I was like, I think I'm done with Marvel for a while.
Mm,
X-Men at the time was also pretty bad, so I didn't have any qualms about leaving. And I heard that there was an Iceman solo series after Iceman had come out that was all about middle-aged Iceman trying to figure out what it meant to be gay and be a mutant, and going on dates and learning learning what it meant to be a queer adult. And I heard people complaining about that, saying, this sucks. Why would anyone want to read an X-Men comic like this? Who cares about Iceman coming out to his parents? And I was like, that is all I want to read about in a comic book.
Exactly.
This sounds amazing. So I had no idea what was going on with the X-Men at the time, because X-Men continuity is at times a nightmare. But I didn't care. I picked it up and I read the whole thing. And after reading... I read that about the same time I saw Black Sails, which is another gay pirate show. And I said, I was like, why isn't all media like this? Like, why am I reading books about heteros when I could be reading amazing stuff written by queer authors telling authentic queer stories? So I don't read books anymore unless there's queer characters in it. I made a rule to myself after reading that. I was like, I'm never going to read another book unless there's queer representation in it. And I've been way happier since then. So high key recommend it.
Yeah. Well,
and to that point that Justice said, like, representation does matter. It does mean a lot to see yourself in stories. And characters like Bishop and Sunspot, Jesus, that's Roberto's name. Characters like Sunspot, characters like
Knew
Storm.
it would happen.
Sunspot and Sunfire, I get them mixed up all the time. Are like really important Black characters that there weren't Black characters like that in comics at the time. Like, Storm is the first female Black lead of any superhero team. That's huge. And she's awesome.
Right.
I used to think that Storm was a bad character, or not a bad character. I used to think that Storm wasn't a character for me. Because I knew she was an important character and I knew people liked her, but I just kind of assumed that, I've never connected with her, so she must be, written for a person that, I can't relate to, and that's fine. Like, not every character has to be for me. And no, I was completely wrong. I had only seen bad Storm adaptations, and it wasn't until I went and read good comics with Storm where I was like, oh my goodness, Storm is amazing. She's hands down one of my favorite characters now. And like, people have just mishandled her constantly, and that's heartbreaking.
Well, and that's a really good point though too, of just like, because of the variety of cast, especially with a huge series like X-Men, there's going to be characters that don't represent you that you can still relate to with the right story and with the right approach. Just because they don't represent you doesn't mean they're not for you. Like, that's such an interesting thing I've been like wrestling with in the conversations around representation, mostly with Star Wars, because that's a lot of what we're steeped in here at Nerd Herder. But it's everywhere. It everywhere is trying to make strides to represent, either out of necessity or out of passion and interest. The Halo series, I never thought I would be thinking about it, but the fact that a Halo series is advancing representation in ways, when they get it right.
Yes, when they get
I'll
it
put it
right.
up. But nonetheless, it's just that just because that doesn't represent a lot of people that I'm sure are watching that, because a lot of people watching Halo probably look like me, it doesn't mean that it's not a character for you too. Like, I think there's something so interesting in opening up our eyes to not just see and not just accept representation for them. That character is for them, but to also just see representative characters as characters and journey along with them, just like we would any other character that does maybe represent us more closely, if that makes sense. I don't know if it makes sense.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So, but I love that. So if we're ever to make any progress, we've got to dive
Buckle
in.
in. Yeah.
Right. Buckle in, folks. Do the cross buckles. There's not like a great audio example of like an X buckle, but X buckle yourselves
Like
in.
the really, really dumb jet buckles.
Did they have X buckles in the jet?
They did have
Okay,
X
I was gonna
buckles
say
in the
that'd be
jet.
such a missed opportunity if they didn't do that.
They were dumb.
They were X's for the X-Men. Anyway.
Andy, please talk.
Sure. So I mean, I did everything. I did every on-screen adaptation except for The Gifted, because I haven't watched The Gifted because The Gifted sounded terrible. I'm sure I'll watch it at some point, but I did. Oh, and I haven't watched the anime yet. I do a podcast called Ending Pending where we cover TV shows that have only lasted for a single season, and that's been on our list, and I haven't watched it yet. So I'm gonna get to it, I promise. But yeah, I went in kind of sections. So first is live action movies. Starting with X1. Have you guys seen X1?
Yes.
Okay.
So we're talking. Unless there's a different X1.
No.
Because somebody
No.
asked me the other day if I had seen Fantastic Four, and I was very surprised to find out that they meant like that ridiculous, like bombastic, like early 90s, 92.
The made-for-TV one?
Yeah. And I'm like, no.
I love that version.
Why have you seen it's like, what in the world? I thought you were talking about the one with checklists. Oh my gosh.
It's the only good Doctor Doom adaptation we've ever gotten. But that's a whole nother discussion.
That is another episode, and I am perfectly willing to do it because I actually have some kind words for Fan Four Stick, actually. So
I have kind words for a scene in Fan Four Stick.
It's probably the same scene.
Exactly.
So anyway, but yes, X1, which was 99, I think. 99 or I was going to say 97, 98 or 99. I know it was later. It was coming into the millennia.
Why my parents took 5-year-old me to see that, I have no idea.
Fair. I remember buying this at Kroger. I didn't see it in theaters. I've seen none of these films in theaters. I saw this on VHS, and for some reason they had it at Kroger.
That's right, because we didn't go see Old Man Logan in theaters.
Mm-mm. We stayed up and watched that on New Year's Eve with some friends.
Yes, we did. That was a lovely time.
So this movie is pretty good. I would say it's a good superhero movie, and it's a pretty good X-Men movie. I gave it a 26 out of 50 in my ranking, which is actually very high because I'm pretty brutal to a lot of these. But
I mean, hey, fair's fair. Be true, Andy.
Yeah.
Be true.
It lost some points on how I feel it handled the mutant metaphor and the baseball rule. We don't really see characters having fun, but it got good points for teamwork, for being a horny soap opera, and for being decently true to the source material.
And what the thing with this one, I will say, and with the original trilogy of X films, is they started very strong, very fast with the soap opera love triangle.
Yes.
Quote unquote love triangle thing they had going on.
I hate the Gene Scott Logan love triangle. I love in the comics right now that the three of them are just sleeping together. Awesome. I think that's amazing. They have a connected bedroom in their house on the moon, and they're living their best lives, and it's great.
That is I have ever heard in my life.
The best horny soap opera stuff for me in this is Mystique is just like dripping horny sex appeal constantly.
She's don't know how they got that in. Like,
yeah, she's like licking stuff, and like she's just having so much fun being evil.
Right.
And Xavier and Magneto are married.
Yes.
Ian McKellen went into this saying Magneto's a gay man, and I love that.
Their dynamic was better for his headcanon coming in. I don't always like. There's some actors that form a headcanon that's particularly their own and doesn't necessarily find truth in the material.
You can say Jared Leto.
And I feel like it suffers for that. But then there's times where it's just like, no, that is the best way you could absolutely approach that. I mean, they did the same thing with Finn and Poe. And I think that relationship dynamic was better for it. And I think that's why it's such an honest relationship. But Mystique, I will say, too, is I get such, and obviously it predates her, but I get such Ventress vibes
Yeah.
from that of just like,
Mhm.
how did we get this in? Because Clone Wars is way more of a kid show. It's not a kid show, but it's way more of a kid show than this was. And they still got a good bit of that like evil villainous sex appeal in there, and
Oh yeah.
I was astonished every time. Um, but yeah, I
So
don't know how they worked Mystique in or got that past to the board.
on paper, I don't like the idea that Mystique is Magneto's like lieutenant in this. Like in the comics, they kind of hate each other, and she's never worked for him. She has her own brotherhood, and Magneto is off being a good guy by the point that she like comes around.
Mm-hmm.
But their dynamic in this is so fun that I don't even mind. And fun fact, this created like X1 is the reason why in the comics Magneto's helmet blocks telepaths. That was
Really?
something made for the movies that then made its way into the comics.
It was just
In the
like-
comics, he just wore the helmet because he's a dramatic
It's
fashionista.
Darth Vader. Yeah, it's just
you know,
everything is extra.
why do
That's
I own a pair
interesting.
of horns? Because they're fun to wear around the house.
That's interesting. I like to like we don't really get the Mystique I'm most a fan of, which Evolutions does, which is sort of the Starscream approach to Mystique of kind of the usurping, like it's the same thing of like she's got her own agenda the whole time, and I think that was an interesting dynamic because when it's all Magneto all the time, or the only way you escalate from Magneto is to go to Darkseid or something like that. Not Darkseid, Apocalypse. All the big purple boys in my head are the same. Like it's just such a leap. You go from Magnet Boy to like Infinite Power Boy, and it's just too much. So having someone else who's probably as wise but more street smart than Magneto, I thought was an interesting dynamic Evolutions took.
Mystique in the comics is the worst person ever. She will stab anyone in the back. She will do deranged like schemes. Like when she found out Mystique is like an immortal lesbian, and her lesbian wife, Irene Adler, yes, Irene Adler from the Sherlock Holmes books, is canonically the same Irene Adler that Mystique is married to, because Mystique is canonically Sherlock Holmes.
I gotta get
She was presenting as a man and was a crime-solving lesbian detective with her wife.
I'm here
That's
for it.
Marvel Comics canon. But like, she found out that their adopted daughter Rogue was dating Gambit in the comics, and she was like, "Well, I hate Gambit, so I'm going to try and get Gambit to cheat on my daughter with me by like trying to be like a sexy Catholic schoolgirl at Xavier's, and I know that Gambit sucks, and then I'll tell Rogue and she'll break up with him." And Gambit is like figures it out, and he's like, "What is wrong with you? Like, why couldn't you just have a conversation with us?"
Right.
And Mystique was like, "Yeah, you'll never catch me," and like disappears.
Until
like,
next time.
she attacks Magneto at the Holocaust Memorial. Like, she works for the US government and then like kills a bunch of people and then impersonates them. Like, Mystique is always doing like deranged evil stuff. Like, and
Whereas
I love her.
here-
Like, yes, work girl. Like, do your evil plan. Like, go for it. Have a blast. Burn the world down.
Right. But then
and-
X1 turns her into Vanna White.
She's a bit more of a, like she's not quite a henchman, because Magneto seems to enjoy her. He doesn't like Toad or Sabretooth.
Right. For sure.
So like
he did not weep over their loss. Like, I mean, if you fast forward to X3, I there was genuine, I think, remorse that he lost her as a mutant, at least.
Yeah. But yeah, Mystique in this, she's not comic book Mystique. She's not like as zany, I guess. She's not as like conniving, but she's incredible. Love her.
Absolutely. So what about your rank for X2?
So X2 ranks higher. It ends up with a 31 out of 50. It is middle of the road for source material, the baseball rule, and teamwork. We really don't see people having fun except for Pyro, and his version of fun is lighting humans on fire.
I mean,
And I do love that for him. But it gets a 6 for horny soap opera, so a little down from X1. It's a little less horny, but it gets an X for the mutant metaphor.
Yes. Yes.
So the thing that breaks my heart with this movie is it's based on God Loves, Man Kills, which is an amazing Claremont comic, where the main villain is William Stryker, but instead of a general, he's a reverend. And he's specifically based on Billy Graham and Jerry Falwell. And I went to Jerry Falwell's school, so I have a lot of feelings about Jerry Falwell. And I think it was a huge misstep to make him a generic military guy. Like, the evil of Reverend Stryker is that he is a religious zealot who believes he speaks for God. And, like, the imagery of him crucifying Charles Xavier and the imagery of his followers. The book opens with 2 of his followers lynching 2 black children because they think they're mutants. And it's excruciatingly difficult to read. There are parts of it that have not aged perfectly. It was written in the late 70s, early 80s. But the intention, I think, is there from Claremont, and he is saying stuff. And I think this movie, to say, like, oh, we're doing God Loves, Man Kills, and we have one black character and she doesn't really do anything, and we're going to remove the Christianity stuff from the villain, and we don't, like, Kitty and Magneto are also 2 stars of this story, and they're both Jewish, and that is also very powerful. So the movie loses some points there for me, but I think it's a banger, and it still holds up really well.
Yeah, I think for me, it does perfectly with the representation as a film in and of itself. It is when you make that comparison, and I didn't realize Reverend Stryker was a thing, but yes, when you pull back, because that, I mean, has historically the church has upheld bigotry, still does in a lot of ways, and so to kind of dance around that kind of does lighten the representation in this one, because I think having the scene with Iceman and his family
the literal
was
coming out scene.
yeah, it was so pivotal, I think, and I think that was the one, because the first film I remember watching as a kid and not really getting, this was just a superhero movie, and to be fair, I was a kid, but I remember watching this one and not having room for, this is telling me something, this is representing something.
Iceman blowing on the soda bottle and handing it back to Logan is branded into every gay boy's mind who watched this in the early 2000s. It's something. And then there's the coming out scene, and then, like, Pyro in the comics is he's gay. Like, they have not ever been able to fully say it because Jim Shooter is a huge bigot and wouldn't let Claremont say stuff like that, and we've had people trying to get other characters out of the closet for like 40 years now, and Pyro is one of them. But like, comic book Pyro is very gay, even if it hasn't been said. And so, like, Magneto and Mystique, like, taking him in, like, taking this, like, angry queer young man who, like, doesn't have a place to, like, place his rage, and then, like, being sassy on the X-Jet, and then, like, adopting him, and Magneto being like, you're a god among men, like, don't let anyone tell you differently. Like, he's like, don't hide your light under a bushel, let it shine, like, burn the heteronormatives down. Like, it's beautiful.
Which, honestly, if I got that kind of encouragement, I'm not sure that I wouldn't turn to the dark side.
I was gonna say, I was there for that family drama. I would watch that show.
It seems really obvious to me that, like, Pyro is jealous of Rogue. Like, Pyro is jealous that Bobby pays attention to Rogue.
Right.
Yeah, I love it. X2 rules. The conversion therapy stuff with Jason Stryker is also, like, it's right there. It's very apparent. It's very brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yep. I think it's some of the better they've done in film.
Like
And I don't feel bad about saying that necessarily.
No.
you don't want to
Quality-wise, I
think
mean.
about it. You don't want to think about it too much, but the fact that in the astral plane, Jason as a little girl
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
is not subtle.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Absolutely. Well, and again, there's so much in this, and a lot of it centering around Bobby and Stryker and his son for me. As a kid, it was very hard to miss this was bigger than just I'm supposed to like watch and have fun and
Yeah.
enjoy superheroes. I'm like I feel like I'm learning something, right? And that's why I say like quality wise, I mean there's some here and there's, but I think as far as like if you want good X-Men content, I think X2 is some of the better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the storytelling and maybe some acting gets better in other films, but um I think this one hits a lot of marks very well for me.
It's better than most of the MCU.
Ooh,
It is.
that
It
is a
just
hot jalapeno
it
take.
is. Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, like, I get, I can get a lot of people's opinions about the MCU. Um, it's one of those things that it's hard to compare to me, like X-Men to anything MCU, because it
Oh,
comes
they're so different.
yeah,
Incredibly
it comes from an era where I think they were trying so hard to be comic book movies. They were trying to be comic book in film.
different.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas MCU is not trying to do anything but good film, I think. Um, and so I think sometimes it's that, but I will say MCU every film has a nugget, is what I've come to learn. It's not a whole film in and of itself. Sometimes it's just one scene that I find is really why I like this so much. It's really
Mhm.
weird because generally I watch a film for the film. I don't watch it for 5 minutes, but there's so many MCU films where it's the 5 minutes. That's what I want. That's what gave me the little good feelies.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's really interesting. We luckily plan to explore the MCU a little bit more ahead of the calendar
It's
in
just so
Nerdiverse. So
much.
Nice.
there is a lot.
Yeah. So I don't
Speaking
think I
of so
said my
much,
final score for X2, but it got a 31 out of 50, which is the highest I've ranked any of the movies.
so we're already at the peak. Now it's all
Yeah.
downhill.
Yay!
Speaking
Speaking
of,
of downhill, X3.
I hate this movie so
Um,
much.
I
so for me, it lost a lot of points on being true to the source material and the baseball rule. We don't see any characters having fun.
no.
No, I really didn't have fun.
It ranked higher than X2 on teamwork. We actually see people like combining their powers a
Yes.
little bit. And it ranked okay on the mutant metaphor, and that's mostly just because of Angel.
Mm-hmm.
The Angel trans stuff here is like
That for me was like I remember being frustrated, and that's the one opinion that hasn't changed about this movie for me, is being so frustrated that we get a great Angel's just the bookend.
Yeah.
Like really no presence, and
he doesn't do anything, but that scene at the
oh
opening,
yeah, absolutely.
Spectacular.
I have been the scared little kid in the bathroom playing with makeup, and then all of a sudden a parent knocks on the door and says like, "Hey, it's time for dinner," and I'm now panicking, trying to
Right.
like,
Let me hide me.
yeah, I gotta
Let
like,
me
I gotta
yeah.
get this shit. Oh, I gotta like scrub this off my face,
Yeah.
like he's taking the grater to his wings, and it just hits so hard. And like,
Definitely.
Bryan Singer's a terrible person. He did the first two. Brett Ratner is a terrible person. He did this one. But like, there are moments here that transcend the very bad people at the helms of these movies.
Absolutely. It happens more
Um,
than people realize with storytelling.
it did not rank very high for being a horny soap opera either. But
Mhm.
this ended up being a 23 out of 50. I don't hate X3 as much as other people do, because I think that there's some stuff here that's good. I like the Brotherhood a lot. We don't get like enough of them, but I love all of the Iceman stuff with Kitty Pryde. Elliot Page is great, and this is accidentally a gay romance now because Kitty is trans and Bobby, yeah. So like I'm very tickled by that. And I love the Bobby Pyro stuff.
We need
I
to
think
start ranking movies retroactively gay.
another big issue I have with these is like, this isn't Ian McKellen's fault because Ian McKellen is perfect and flawless, but these movies seem to think that Magneto isn't a true believer in his cause, and that really bugs me. So the idea that like Magneto would like purposely let any of his mutants get hit with the cure, I find very upsetting. The fact that Magneto says he wants to use the cure on mutants who stand in his way, I find very upsetting. The fact that Magneto wasn't willing to die and wanted to sacrifice Rogue in the first movie, I don't buy that at all. Like,
Well,
Magneto isn't a true believer in these. He's always willing to like let someone else die for him, and to me, that just isn't Magneto.
yeah, it's a classic film villain. It's less of a Magneto representation, and you know, that was the one thing for me with that started in X2 and kind of continued here in some of the scenes that you mentioned. You know, I think some of his manipulation of people in X2 and the sort of treating folks like pawns in the Brotherhood in this one really step outside of, because kind of like you said, the true believer concept of it of is if he's like gaslighting you, it's because he believes what he's telling you, not necessarily just to manipulate you into a place. I can speak, where you serve him, if that makes sense. Whereas sometimes with this, it's just the no, I'm evil. I'm gonna just kind of put you in a position to do this thing because I think it's going to be interesting to see, not because it adds any value to the cause. And I'm like, I don't know about that.
I got to mention this in the chat. Justice said the horny soap opera scene, Jean and Logan in the infirmary, and like, yeah, that scene is very hot. Like, it's
so very, very horny, but not very soap opera-y. I think on that one.
So it did get some like it got a 4 out of 10, and I think the infirmary scene is quite good.
Yeah.
The
tent scene is also very good.
I'm gonna hold off on my like Dark Phoenix of it all thoughts for when we get to Dark Phoenix, but this movie and its handling of Jean Grey is very sexist, and I'm gonna unload, I think, all of that at once when we get to the new Dark Phoenix. But I'm good to move on to First Class if y'all are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say for me.
Oh, sorry, X-Men Origins Wolverine is next.
Yeah. For me, the only thing I really have with X-Men 3 is I definitely didn't hate it as much when I rewatched everything. There is some value to these first 3 films, watching them pretty straight together, which is kind of how I did it. I binged every like period itself. So the trilogy, and then the sort of then I did the X-Men, or not the X-Men, the Wolverine movies together. So Origins, and then Wolverine, and then Logan, and then I did the sort of reboot-esque young kids version.
Yeah, the First Class generation.
Yeah. Definitely
so
watched better that way.
My biggest issue with these first 3 is what leads into X-Men Origins Wolverine, which is that these movies are only interested in Logan. And the X-Men at its core is a comic book about women. All of the main characters, all the main POV characters in the most influential and best stories are young women who have joined the X-Men. So it starts with Kitty, and then we get Rogue, and then we get Ilyana, and then we get Jubilee, and then you know, like, it just we get these young women who are like learning how to be superheroes and joining the X-Men and like being introduced to this new world. And for these movies to be like, Logan's the POV, it's like, what? No. So X-Men Origins Wolverine got a 2 out of 50.
2?
Yeah. It gets a 2 for source material, because there are characters who have the proper names. But then it gets a 0 in the baseball rule. It gets a 0 in teamwork. It gets a 0 for the mutant metaphor, and it gets a 0 for being a horny soap opera. It it's a terrible X-Men movie. It might be an okay Wolverine movie. But boy howdy,
It's a great Deadpool movie.
I will kill you.
Said no one ever.
it's a terrible X-Men movie.
You're not wrong there for sure. I'm just surprised it got so low.
I like Taylor Lautner as Gambit, but he doesn't do anything. Like
Mhm.
No.
I thought the Sabretooth recast was fine, but he doesn't like get to be Sabretooth really. And
No.
like
Well, and the fact that this still tries to exist in a continuity where that's still Sabretooth from the first one somehow
yeah.
makes no sense. Like I
And-
always remembered that. Like I kind of liked Liev Schreiber, but knowing where he ended up always like made it kind of a bitter enjoyment. I was like, I can't really like it,
No.
because I know where this is going to end up.
And like the worst thing you can do, like I used to say that I hated Wolverine, and it wasn't until just like with other characters, it wasn't until I read the Claremont run that I was like, oh, I think I like this character now. Logan works best as a supporting character. He cannot be your main character, because if he's your main character, you have to know things about him. And Logan only works when he's really mysterious and you don't know anything about him. And so the fact that they were like, we're going to tell you everything about the Fox universe's Logan's origin, and it's like, wow, this was all way less interesting than what I was imagining. And like the scenes in the first X-Men movie are way more brutal and excruciating than any of the Weapon X scenes we get in this movie. So it's like, how is the 2 minutes we get of flashbacks of Logan way more interesting than a whole movie about that?
I'm
it's
really wondering what
bonkers.
happened with the grading of this one, because I mean that whole him getting his power sequence is completely dialed down. I mean, it's like a kids TV version compared, and not that it has to be gory or excessive, but like it should have a level of trauma to it.
It needs to make you feel something.
Right. This didn't do any of that, and it wasn't like, it's like they didn't even try to of everything else. Like, we did get a glimpse of what this looks like. They didn't try to even replicate that, and it's just a very interesting choice on their part. This is not a great movie for me, for sure. I think there are folks in it that take it seriously and have a good time. I think there's folks in it that are getting a paycheck, and then I think there's other people that don't know what they're doing there. And one of them is the director, I feel like.
It's fair.
Yeah, and I want to stress again that my rating is just like, how good is it as an X-Men adaptation?
Sure.
So, like the Constantine movie is a terrible Hellblazer movie. It is not a good Constantine movie, but it's an amazing movie. I love that movie. I will watch that movie all day. Like, it's the Keanu of it all is fantastic, but it's not a very good like Constantine movie.
No.
But moving on to First Class, this ranked pretty high. It lost a lot of points on the source material of it, like of trying to honor the source material, but it picked up a ton of points on the baseball rule. It picked up points on showing characters using teamwork. It ranked an 8 for being a horny soap opera, and it lost some points on being a mutant metaphor.
Yeah. I can see that. That movie makes some weird choices.
So the parts where it like really lost points were with it being true to the source material. Characters like Darwin, who his power is that he cannot die. He will adapt to anything no matter what. And it's really fun to see him get put in these bonkers scenarios and seeing how he'll adapt. Like, one of my favorite examples is the Hulk attacked him and it just teleported Darwin across the country. Because the safest way to fight the Hulk is to not be there. and
Yeah.
just not to fight the Hulk. So the fact that he dies is heartbreaking. They really screw Emma Frost over, and I adore Emma. She's easily in my top 5 X-Men, and she's just totally mishandled. And to try and do the mutant metaphor with an all-white cast after Darwin dies, and the only other character of color joins the evil Nazi is just like,
Right.
y'all, like,
Completely
what are
missed
you
the mark.
doing here? So I would say that this is a great Charles and Eric movie. Like, it's really horny for their romance and their breakup, but it's not the best like X-Men movie. And it doesn't seem interested in the mutant metaphor. Like,
That was what I was gonna say, is this continued what started in Origins for me with this, is they stopped trying to really do anything representative with the storytelling. They just tried to make a movie about interesting characters, and they reduced down representation to characters and everything like that. And I think that's why, for me, a good bit of the First Class era doesn't work for me. Because so much of it is, like you said, it gets down to, it's just really Eric and Charles.
Yeah.
That's what makes it, and honestly, it leans a lot on Fassbender, and that can only take it so far. So much as Hugh Jackman can only take Wolverine so far. At some point, the movie and the content has to be good too.
It's the only movie we see Charles Xavier teaching people how to use their powers. Which, like, that montage is amazing. I absolutely love that montage. The cast makes, like, the roster of X-Men makes no gosh darn sense, and you just kind of have to ignore it. And no one's acting like their characters except for Charles and Eric. Like, Mystique isn't Mystique. I guess Hank is Hank, but, like, that's not Banshee. That's not Havoc. That's not Darwin. That's not Angel Salvatore. That's not Emma Frost. That's not even Sebastian Shaw. You just have to, like, accept that these are brand new inventions, and
they are their own.
Just roll with it.
Yeah. And that's that, and again, and that's that movie for me. I remember, and I thought, was this your favorite for a while?
It was for a while, just because of James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender flirting with each other the entire movie.
Gotcha.
The part with the gun, and then Hanukkah, and then the submarine. It's so good.
Spectacular.
It's so good.
And so, but for the majority of it, it does do that, where it's like that, like, suspend anything. And I don't even know that much about X-Men, but suspend anything more than this is about two guys putting together a team and doing a thing. Like, it just feels it just feels very, very, very reduced, which maybe was a safe play, and I think that's why a lot of people do like it as far as the films go. It is a safe play. It's I think in ways a better teamwork film than some others, and I think by dialing back the drama, you get more people in for the action, because it does dial that up a little bit. Like, I can see the choices, I just don't necessarily like the choices they made.
Yeah, there's some odd ones here. But it ranked at 28 out of 50, which is higher than X1. It is just below X2. It's currently in second place. Next up is the Wolverine, which got a 7 out of 50. Wow. It is decently true to some of the, like, standalone Wolverine comics for source material, and it is it's a tiny bit horny soap opera, just a smidge.
Little bit.
But it gets a 0 for the baseball rule. We don't see anyone having fun. It gets a 0 for teamwork because he's by himself, and it gets a 0 for the mutant metaphor because this movie is not about mutants. It's about one guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this goes back to where, so you were very generous you were generous in your opinion, not your ranking of Wolverine Origins, and that it's not a good X-Men movie. Maybe it's a good Wolverine. I don't think it's good at either. I think this at least is a good Wolverine movie.
This is a good movie.
Yeah.
The Snake Lady is bizarre, but the silver samurai of it all is cool.
Yeah.
And it's cool to see Hugh Jackman do some like Ronin Logan stuff.
Mhm.
So like I would watch this movie tomorrow. Like it's a perfectly fine action movie. I would say it is a good Wolverine movie. X-Men Origins Wolverine is bad across the board. But this is fine. This is fine.
Yeah. I and that's the thing for me is like, and I get in your ranking, it emphasizes the X-Men. And I think that's why a lot of people, this doesn't work surprisingly more than Origins. Like, I have more people that like or mention liking X-Men Origins Wolverine than this.
I think people just didn't see it. I think if
I-
people watched it, they'd enjoy it, but no one saw it because Origins was so bad.
And I think there's definitely that, and I think there's still that sort of cheesy action team. Like, put X-Men Origins Wolverine next to like Expendables or something like that. There's the same like flow to the film. There's the same level of cheesiness, and like all of that other stuff is like, but there's still something people like about that kind of train wreck.
Mhm.
And so I think by removing even the littlest bit of glee of, all right, well, at least he's working with ridiculous characters.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that this one missed out, but I think it's a good movie. I think you just don't like Wolverine.
It's not that I don't like Wolverine. I just don't like the fact that they made him 6'2", 6'3".
He's born
Yeah.
like he's
He's
just
a
Hugh Jackman
short
is just
king.
born that way.
Make Glenn Danzig.
That's not Hugh Jackman.
Logan is 5'2".
I am Wolverine sized, sir. Thank you.
I think you're
Logan-
taller.
I'm an inch taller than Wolverine.
Well, also, Logan is a trans man.
Yeah.
He's 5'2". He's covered in hair. He's, angry, which like is maybe not the best stereotype of trans men, that testosterone makes you, into an anger machine. But
Yeah.
he's got cool scars, and he has a bunch of female clones of himself running around.
That's true.
He does.
There's over 100 female clones of Wolverine. Either they're trans or he is. I'm just saying that's just
You
how
might
it
be
works.
onto something, Andy.
Yeah.
That explains all of the art I've seen with top scars.
And the one of the things I love about you, Andy, is just the way you look at things like that. I mean, Terminator is a movie about Jesus. Batman's a Christmas movie. Wolverine is trans. You heard it here on Nerd Herder first.
Yeah.
No. Alien is a mummy movie.
A mummy?
Mm-hmm. It's a 1930s, 1918s mummy movie, but set in space.
That's actually
God,
very
you're
brilliant
so
way to look at
smart.
that.
The ship is a pyramid.
Yeah.
The alien is, a cursed mummy, and it's taking out the colonists who have
cursed
come who
colonists.
don't understand it.
That is super interesting.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. That's a great way to describe that movie too.
See, this is why you should have Andy on your podcast.
Everybody deserves an Andy.
Please get you an
Days of Future Past ranks
Meh.
real high. It's a 28 out of 50 here for Days of Future Past. It got pretty even, like pretty high for source material, the baseball rule, and teamwork. We see a ton of cool teamwork in the future scenes of characters using their powers in interesting ways to help each other.
Mhm.
One of my favorites is Magneto chucks the X-Jet at the invading Sentinels, and then Storm hits it with a lightning bolt, so it explodes.
Mhm.
And like Blink is doing all sorts of cool combos with like Bishop. She's like opening up portals and he's shooting through them. Dope. Love that stuff. It loses points on the mutant metaphor again, and it's not very horny at all.
Yeah. For me, it's all the stuff you mentioned with the future that I like about this movie.
Seeing the original cast interact with the new cast like is so beautiful. Like Sir Patrick Stewart telling James McAvoy like, we need you to hope again, like hits me right in the feels. And like being like really young and in the closet when those original movies were coming out, and dreaming of Patrick Stewart like coming to bring me to the X Mansion where I would be accepted, and then to have him come back again for this movie was just like amazing.
Yeah.
I like the design of the like old timey Sentinels too. They look like
Mm.
classic cars. They look like old timey Corvettes, but
Yeah.
robots, and that's really cool.
Yeah, it looked like they rolled off the Ford assembly line
Yeah.
Mhm.
with this, which is very of the times too. Um, I, there's nothing about the concept of the plot, and I'm sure I'd love the comic, um, but it's some of the execution in film, and like I said, I think I'm just very critical of the first class era cast. And so when it jumps between characters and cast that I'm invested in to them, I
Mhm.
think I kind of eh.
This is the last time Mystique is worth watching. Like, this is the last time Jennifer
Hard
Lawrence is
agree.
worth watching in these movies. She's not great, but they're trying to like have her connect to the original Mystique in
Mhm.
this, which is cool. Um, Hank like going back and forth between human and mutant form is super frustrating and lame. The Quicksilver stuff is cute and fun, but then he leaves for no reason, and it's like I feel like y'all could really use a speedster still.
Right.
Yeah. Good idea.
And
They would have stopped the assassination too quickly.
It's
We wouldn't
true.
have had experiment.
yeah, and just the like too much Wolverine again. Like Kitty Pryde is the main POV character in Days of Future Past,
Right.
and I get why they felt like they had to switch it with Hugh Jackman because he's been
The face.
the face of these movies for so long.
Mhm.
But it I don't know. I've had enough of him by this point, so
For sure.
Fair.
For sure. And I think that's the thing about the because honestly, um, First Class and Days of Future Past, um, those themselves, those for me kind of end an era and begin a new one
mhm.
as we go on from this. Because, and I think that was kind of the goal is a
Yeah.
reset. And I think I as someone who enjoys the later films benefits from the reset because these two movies are only necessary to get that reset for me.
Mhm.
Because definitely we see a dynamic shift again. Like you mentioned, Mystique kind of tapers off. We get more interesting characters, I think, in place of her
Well,
moving forward.
we're about to go drastically downhill after this one, which
N-
uh,
Not
uh
to me.
do you like Age of Apocalypse?
Yes.
I
so
like Apocalypse
cute.
and Dark Phoenix. Yeah, so for me,
Oh
it's
no.
honestly X2, X1, Dark Phoenix, Apocalypse, and then Logan the Wolverine, um, and then probably Future Past, First Class, and then Wolverine Origins.
I have a lot of good things to say about Dark Phoenix actually.
I'm
I
super
have
chaotic.
almost I have almost nothing good to say about Apocalypse. And like we might as well just talk about the apocalypse of it all. It got a 5 out of 50. It gets 2
Better
points
than
for
Wolverine Origins, though.
it is better. It's not the worst on here. It 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 got a 2 for source material and it got a 3 for the baseball rule because I like that they went to the mall.
That
They
was
did
good.
go to the mall,
That's
didn't
that's a
they?
fun that's a
I
fun
like the
scene of like the characters spending time together. I almost call this the Fast and Furious rule because I love that the Fast and Furious movies end with them like having a cookout
right.
constantly and like having some Coronas.
You gotta
And
have the one scene.
this mall scene to me is like, oh, like they're family, like they're going to the mall together, they're talking about Star Wars, that's cute. But man, this movie is how do you misuse Oscar Isaac so badly?
See, so
You cover him
that's
up.
fair. That's probably the fairest thing and the biggest thing because I like so much uh around the film. I wish the villain was better. Better portrayal, better execution of. Like they should have just done Thanos rules. I think in that of just do it CGI because I don't. I liked Oscar in it. Um, I didn't like that he was not um as intimidating in stature, not as um good to look at. He I do get the Ivan Ooze comparison. with Apocalypse.
Yes. Oh my
Like,
god.
I get it.
He's got big eyebrows.
Goodness, it's rough to watch. I don't understand, like, Mystique, like, leading the X-Men is absurd. Like I said before, she is like the worst possible person in the comics, and like I love that about her. I
Mhm.
love that she's a terrible, mean, vengeful, spiteful woman. I love her.
Mhm.
Like
That's
I
what she
want to
does
see
for a
her
lot.
do. I want to see her. Yes, I want to see her do terrible things, for reasons that maybe I understand and maybe I don't. And for her to be like leading the X-Men is just like
I
bonkers.
think
It's
that was
bonkers.
I think that was a Jennifer Lawrence thing.
Well,
I'm
yeah,
not
it's
gonna
that she got huge from Hunger Games, and they're like,
Yeah.
"Well, we got to like give her more screen time."
Yeah.
Her makeup looks bad in this. She doesn't want to be here. She's stiff as a wooden board. And
Dark Phoenix couldn't come fast enough for her.
I do like the costumes at the end of the movie.
Mhm,
Like they actually look like X-Men costumes. I like that
for sure.
I like the actor that they got for Storm and for Psylocke,
Mhm.
but they don't do anything. Angel can fly and he dies in a plane crash. Like there's just a lot of
Went out like
strange
Leonard Skinner, man. It was
there's a
not great.
there's a lot of strange decisions going on here. And it's very busy. It's very hard to tell who's fighting who and what's going on. And I don't know what Apocalypse's plan or goal was.
I don't
Up
think
It's
they did either.
yeah.
Again, for me, for sure, Apocalypse can definitely be better. That's the biggest thing for me that can get better about this one. I think the biggest thing, and I'll agree in a lot of the especially when you draw the lines to source material. It's not as great there, I'm sure. Um, but this one, unlike many of them, was fun again to watch. Um, for me, again, because it's ranked very similarly, it was like X1, X2 levels of fun to watch for me again. Even if it didn't have those substantial scenes, it still was entertaining, I think, for the first time. Um, and by changing out some of the classic characters that I had kind of grown tired of, similar to Wolverine, and by getting rid of newer characters that I had started to get tired of, or at least lessening them, um, it, it worked in a way that ended up being a good film to pop some popcorn to for me. By me saying I like it, I'm in no way making a this is art
Sure.
No.
comparison. And neither for Dark Phoenix, although that is much better than Apocalypse for me. But I think Apocalypse has to walk so Dark Phoenix can run with these two films for me.
People have a
I
lot of opinions.
I like a lot of the new cast
Mm.
choices. I
Mhm.
think that they were very fun. I think if they had had more to do, these like this would have been a much better movie. We waste a lot
Yeah,
of time on characters who and actors who don't want to be there, and I think that tracks it down.
yeah, and I can definitely even see that in parts that I like of this, and so it's one of those weird ones where it's just like I see it's like, the Ewok movies. I see the flaws, but I really like it. I'm having fun, you know?
There's Wilford Brimley.
Right, like, I mean, can we be so bad about it? But Dark Phoenix, I it's so good. I wish more people liked it. I know it's not perfect. I don't think I wouldn't even say Logan is perfect, and I know that's gonna ruffle
Yeah.
feathers, but there's no perfect X-Men movie, I think.
Logan is my next one that I have written down
That
here,
did come through.
and Logan gets a 19 out of 50. Logan is a great movie.
Yes.
Mhm.
It is not a great X-Men movie, so no one come to my house with pitchforks. Logan is a very good movie,
Sure.
but it ends up getting a 0 on the horny soap opera meter because there's
Absolutely no horniness.
There's no one.
0 horniness, and it loses a lot of points on mutant metaphor. But it picked up quite a few points on the baseball rule, the teamwork rule, and the source material rule.
Yeah.
The only thing really bringing it down for me on source material is the Reavers in the comics are people that Logan specifically maimed, and they got cybernetics, and they're not just like a rando mercenary team. They are specifically out for revenge against Logan. And it seems strange to me that in a movie called Logan with the Reavers as main villains that
They wouldn't go that far.
That they wouldn't have shown flashbacks of like Logan like maiming these cyborg dudes and then them like getting the cyborgs and like planning to like hunt him down. They just they're just like random dudes who happen to be hunting Wolverine.
It makes way more sense if they have a personal vendetta.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I don't like the Wolverine clone. The younger Hugh Jackman. I would have rathered Sabretooth there if you're looking for like a personal character who like represents Wolverine's dark side. Like Sabretooth is right there. Omega Red is right there, and he could have done that. Like Wolverine has plenty of nemesis that you could have made that character that he fights at the end with like the dark mirror of Logan. I didn't need like a badly portrayed younger Hugh Jackman.
Well, I think that is so encapsulating of the issue plaguing so many X movies is they think it's got to be all Logan.
Yeah.
I
think they
like
know what
you
they're
know,
doing.
like it's so ironic that they would even get the quote unquote like main adversary, not necessarily the villain, but the adversary wrong by making it Logan as well.
Yeah.
There's something to be said there, I'm sure. But yeah, like you said, like this is another one, and this and the Wolverine for me, I think the things that I like about it center on the broken man, and everything, and I like that. But at the end of the day, like you keep pointing out, that's not an X-Men thing. That's not even in some ways a Wolverine thing.
No.
That's these films versions of Wolverine's thing.
Just like
Logan
be a scrunky little guy, you know?
Right.
Logan at his best is a foil to Cyclops. And I love Cyclops, and sadly these movies decide to like dump on Cyclops to make Wolverine cooler, which is a shame. They should be bringing each other up.
Right, and especially when they did such good casting for the earlier films. Like, come on.
And Wolverine is also at his best when he is adopting young girls and like being a really great male role model. And just being like the best grumpy uncle to like these young women. And this is the only movie that does that. And X-23 in this rules.
Oh, absolutely.
She's great in this. The actor does an incredible job. And I love the relationship between her and Logan. And Xavier is really good in this too. It was great to see Patrick Stewart again. I think his send-off in Days of Future Past was maybe a little like nicer to the character. Like his story in Logan is really dark and upsetting.
Yeah.
But it was still great to see him one last time.
Absolutely.
Until Doctor Strange.
Right. Because he's going to be in Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, the parts I like aren't X-Men things. They're completely disconnected from it. And I think there's plenty of value in liking this because it is I mean, as far as like cinema goes, this is probably the most well done and made film of all of these, minus anything to do with their content.
Yeah.
Right. But it's comes down to the content that decides where it sits with things. And yeah, if you just make it about Wolverine, it's probably not going to be a great X-Men movie. But you're probably going to have fun 2 out of 3 times.
Dark Phoenix.
Yeah. It's a good place to end it. Because again, I think I was not expecting to like this because when I went back, and this was part of the reason I went back, was because I realized I hadn't watched Dark Phoenix. And so the first time I saw Phoenix was when I decided to go back and just take in everything for what it is and lead up to that point. And and it was interesting to me to see how my opinions had changed from when I'd see them, 'cause, I was very harsh on the original trilogy. I really liked First Class trilogy, and I avoided Apocalypse for a long time and then Dark Phoenix for a long time, worried about where they were gonna go, and I was so surprised to find out that what's possibly the last X-Men film, in the era that it was, is probably one of my favorites. It's kinda interesting.
I don't hate this movie. Um, it gets a 4. Oh, it gets a 3 for source material. It gets a 0 for the baseball rule. No one
Yeah.
has fun in this movie.
No.
It gets a 10 for teamwork. This movie, the final X-Men movie, is the only movie that gets a perfect score for showing how the X-Men should work together.
There you go.
It's so good. It's so fun. The story is impossible to follow and kind of
Yeah.
bad. But like there's a moment where Xavier realizes Nightcrawler is teleporting into like a trap and like uses his telepathy to like pull Kurt back. It's the only movie that has Xavier actually like use his power to help in the field, which is
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
bonkers. There's like a moment where like Cyclops like can't get a visual on someone, and I forget who tosses him up, but I think like Beast or something like throws him up so he can like get a blast out. Like Storm is doing all sorts of cool combos with people. Oh, this is like the only good movie where the X-Men fight like the X-Men, and
Yeah,
it's just
the
wild that it took them this long to like nail it.
yeah, the fight where they're trying to get at Jean,
Mm.
when she's having the power stripped of her, and then the fight on the train, I mean, unparalleled levels of goodness. I mean,
It's the best Magneto stuff ever. Like
yeah,
Magneto is wild in that train fight.
yeah. This felt like playing with my toys as a kid, of just,
Mm.
like, insane off the wall,
Oh,
it was just the most. It was most like what you would see in a great episode of the show, or in a comic. I feel like it wasn't just, "We're gonna shoot from the range," or, "We're just gonna throw Logan at it." It was definitely thought out, I think.
Quicksilver grabbing everyone and then running over to Kurt in super speed so then Kurt can teleport them away. Like
Mhm.
there's a lot of like really cool, clever stuff like that. Gets a 5 for the mutant metaphor. Some of the politics in this are interesting. Like there's direct discussions of like Xavier trying to be an assimilationist and Magneto being an isolationist and saying like, no, like I'm going to Genosha and only mutants are allowed there.
Yeah.
And Xavier is like buddies with the president now and trying to like get interviews and be on the news. Like
Right.
there's some interesting stuff there going on. It's not horny at all. Like it's a 0 on the horny factor.
Yeah. This one of the new era is probably the most, I think, that they try to lean into any sort of moral question, conundrum kinda thing with that. Kinda like you said, where again, Xavier and Charles, or, and Eric kinda representing a side, to things.
Mystique in this is terrible. She is god awful. Jennifer Lawrence is a talented actor, and she is not having it. She does not want to be here, and
No.
it shows. Her makeup looks really bad,
Yeah,
and
Party City levels.
she's not even phoning it in. She's just not
No.
there. She is,
She's just furniture at that point.
and when she finally dies, it becomes a much better movie. The
Agreed.
problem is we spend way too much time with her before that.
Yeah, and
And it really drags this movie down. If you watch this movie from after she dies on, it's significantly more fun.
absolutely. And it again, because that early half play is plagued by what the last one suffered with too, is where she's leading and it's just not the right dynamic for the group. It just doesn't feel right ever.
So to compare this with X3 and why both these movies don't work ultimately is whereas the actual Dark Phoenix saga is considered one of the greatest comic books of all time, is that the Dark Phoenix saga in the comics, one, has years of setup. Like
Mm,
Claremont is slowly dripping out bits of it and leading up to it. And we see Jean go from this like she's kind of like the popular girl in school. Like, I think X-Men Evolution does the best job with Jean. She's a little self-righteous, but she's ultimately like a really good person, but she kind of knows she's a really good person. But she's nice to people. She believes in her own niceness and goodness, maybe a little too much, but she's very like conservative. And then slowly after she gets the Phoenix Force, she starts using her powers in little by little more ways that make you, the reader, and the characters a little uncomfortable until ultimately she's gaslit by a character called Mastermind, and she becomes Dark Phoenix and does horrific stuff. And then the X-Men get her back, and then she ultimately sacrifices, like she chooses to sacrifice herself so that the Phoenix can't return. And in X-Men 3, it's about Logan, and it's only about Logan. It's not about Jean, and Logan chooses to kill Jean. So the choice
of mutant cure, I would like to point out.
Yeah.
Literally, mutant cure is flying left and right, and you choose to just stab her.
And here, she doesn't do anything Dark Phoenix-y.
No. It's way more personal.
I know that she kills Mystique, which is tragic, but like killing one person to me is not the Dark Phoenix saga. Like the Dark Phoenix saga is when she blows up Dabari. Like the Death Star, she just like eats a planet.
Right.
So
I think,
and it's not about her. I don't know who the main character of this movie is. I think it's Mystique until Mystique dies, but then I don't know from there who the protagonist is. But it's definitely not Jean. Like during the whole train fight, she's locked up. Like that's the climax of the movie.
I think it's like you said. I think it's Mystique, and then the mainness is disseminated amongst a few characters. I think though, what I like is, although X3 tried to do the trauma and bad actions of Phoenix, I don't think it had strength on the personal struggle of Jean. I like that this one does do that more. It's more personal, even if it doesn't back it up with a lot of horrendous action, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the other issue is this idea of like, what does Jean's death do? And in the comics, Jean's death affects the entire team incredibly personally, and it ends up elevating Storm to being leader of the X-Men. And that's a huge deal. It's the first time a Black woman is leading a superhero team in comics. It's massive. And Storm now is the main character of the X-Men moving forward for the rest of the Claremont era. It's dope. In X3, Jean dies for Logan's pain. And in Dark Phoenix, while Jean doesn't die, I feel like her going Dark Phoenix doesn't propel Jean's story. It propels Scott's and Hank's. And I guess Magneto's to some degree. But to me, it doesn't feel like it's centered on Jean. And there's a lot of like critical debate about whether or not the comic Dark Phoenix saga is a sexist story or not. I don't think my opinion on that as a non-binary person necessarily like weighs in, but from my perspective at least, because the setup goes from the slow transformation of Jean into also then propelling a woman of color. I personally feel like it's not a sexist story. Your mileage may vary. Every adaptation I've seen of it has been handled very poorly from a feminist angle, I think. There's still good stuff in this movie, and it doesn't deserve the hate it got. It's a better movie than a lot of people give it credit for, but I think it really drops the ball in giving Jean agency in this story. And every comic which has tried to emulate the Dark Phoenix saga, whether it be with Wanda or whether it be with Raven, I think has missed that and has told tragically a very anti-feminist story where I feel like the original broke a lot of ground in important ways for women characters in comics.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I actually, as you say it, I really agree. I think that unfortunately it had nothing to do with Jean in this. She was very much, her and Dark Phoenix as a whole was just kind of a vehicle for various characters and for the story, I think.
This version of Jean starts out by saying like she's a weirdo. Like we see her kill her mom in the beginning of this, and in the last movie she talked about how she makes people uncomfortable because she's a freak and she's weird and she's different. And it's like, no, Jean is the most popular girl in school. Like
Right.
the whole thing is that when she goes Dark Phoenix and you see her in the Hellfire Gala black corset with a riding crop because Chris Claremont has some things that he's into. He has some proclivities. It's so shocking though, because Jean would never ever wear that. But
the problem is they started out and it was obviously very rushed. I'm glad it was rushed to the point that we got this film. Considering again, it might be it's getting reset, I'm sure. She was cast for Dark Phoenix.
mm-hmm.
And she was just meant to be Jean Grey to get us there, and that misunderstanding of how much of Jean is Dark Phoenix and how much is vice versa. Like it wasn't very well thought. It was definitely we know where we want to end up in a couple of movies, and we're going to work towards that.
And I will say that she's a great actor.
Yeah.
Fantastic, actually.
And I wish we had gotten a better movie for Jean, because that actor is phenomenal and I think really could have killed it. But I do think that this movie deserves another watch if you haven't seen it. And I know that like it was kind of a meme to make fun of it, almost, Morbius before Morbius. This is not a terrible movie. It's a pretty good X-Men movie, and I think it's a pretty good movie overall too. It's maybe I'm being too kind to it. Yeah.
No, but I mean, I'm agreeing with everything you're saying.
There's good stuff here. It's not terrible. I wish Kurt was fuzzy. But other than that, I don't like smooth Kurt, but
yeah. I mean, I agree. I think this is I think it's a pretty darn good movie. I mean, again, it ranks high for me, so I'm biased, but I for sure think it's better than given credit. It's better than other films before it. At the very least, it's okay. I mean, it's fine.
The fight scenes rule. The fight scenes are so good.
If I had to tell you which one to watch that you're gonna have fun, at least it's Dark Phoenix. It's so good.
The plot is a little incomprehensible, but the fight scenes are so good. Magneto in that train is just like,
it's X-Men Unleashed, man.
Yeah, it's something.
It's great. Well, I'm sad because this has been an excessive episode.
A delightfully excessive episode.
And we're not even done.
Do we want to do New Mutants?
Well, I can't because I actually haven't seen that. Well, I mean, you can tell me what you think of it, but okay. I keep passing by it on HBO Max. I have not worked up the courage to actually dive into that because I've not heard great things.
So Dark Phoenix got an 18 out of 50, by the way. I don't remember if I said it. New Mutants gets a 10 out of 50. It gets a lot of chews for the baseball rule, for teamwork, and for Horny soap opera. It gets a 4 for source material, and it gets a 0 for mutant metaphor. It's not interested in the mutant metaphor at all. In fact, it whitewashes Roberto, which is heartbreaking to me. We've had 2 sunspots, and both times he's not been black. He's been a person of color, but he hasn't been black.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like a key part of the character's origin story. So it feels really disrespectful to remove it. I mean, any whitewashing is an issue, but like his powers literally activate because he's playing football, and one of the people he's on the other team to get like in his head, calls him a racial slur, and he gets so angry his powers activate. Like that is a key part of this character's identity. And to repeatedly have him be whitewashed is, I guess I shouldn't say whitewashed. They didn't cast a white guy, but to repeatedly remove the fact that he's a black superhero is really frustrating.
When it's something integral to his character.
Yeah, to the birth of Sunspot is very much tied to the fact that he's black. And I don't think it's an accident that when he's in his Sunspot form, he goes from being, a dark-skinned black person to all black because his body is like absorbing the solar radiation. And that when he's in that form, he's super strong. Like that's not a super subtle allegory,
right?
Like it's a key part of the character. So that sucks. And then Ileana is amazingly cast as the girl from The Witch,
Anna Taylor-Joy.
Yeah,
I love her.
Amazing. I like dream casting. Ileana is another character that just like means a ton to me, and I was so stoked when I saw that casting because like I was like, oh, she's gonna kill it. She's gonna do such a good job. And they made her character racist.
Oh no!
Oh god!
And it just like it hurts so much that like what a brutal character assassination. And I think they were trying to do this thing where like, oh, she's not like mean-spirited, but she's ignorant because she's from Russia and she's never met like a Native American before. But it's really upsetting.
Racism is still definitely
yeah,
racism.
no, it's really bad. And she still does a great job when she's saying any dialogue that isn't that.
Well, that's good.
The girl playing Dany is great. Maisie Williams from Game of Thrones is Wolfsbane, and she's great, and they are allowed to be lesbians in it, which is great. In the comics, they have like this special like relationship and rapport, and they're constantly saying how much they mean to each other and stuff. And if you're reading it, you're like, oh, they're roommates.
Yeah,
it's like the Sailor Moon cousins.
They're family.
Yeah, but it hasn't been allowed to have been said on page yet, and the movie did it, which was really cool. The guy playing Cannonball is the dude from Stranger Things, and I'm sure he's a fine individual, but his southern accent is really bad.
Which Stranger Things kid?
The pervert with the camera that everyone decided to forget that he was a pervert with a camera and just like decided he was a cinnamon roll.
Yeah, he was a pervert, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I don't remember his name.
I hate the character in Stranger Things, and everyone likes him, but
yeah, that was kind of icky.
Yeah, it was really icky, and everyone just kind of forgot about it. Everyone was like, "Oh wow, the dude with the hair is such a meaning because he broke his camera." And I was like, "He was perving on those women. It's a good thing that he broke that kid's camera."
Right.
The older brother of the kid who got slurped up by the Upside Down, that guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
The only man
this is not a Stranger Things podcast.
No, well, and I'm not a Stranger Things person, so like until you correlated it like that, I've seen one episode. I have seen the first episode, and that's it.
They did get some stuff wrong about Dany that was like really important to the Native American representation as well. I'm not a Native American. I don't necessarily understand the cultural significance of like her character's braids in the comics, but they're a very important aspect of her tribal identity, and it's just not in the movie. So there's a lot of stuff that the movie like flubs really hard. I think it's really cool that they went for a horror story route. I think that was like a really interesting idea. The New Mutants comic like dips into horror quite a bit, so I thought that was a neat idea. The Demon Bear saga is dope, and so seeing the big scary demon bear was really cool. Last note though, apparently the director had some really racist ideas for Storm and wanted Storm to be the main villain. And Marvel Comics would not let him do that because
Good.
Storm is an incredibly important character, I would say, not just in like Marvel Comics history, but I would just say like in pop culture in general at this point.
Yeah.
And this idea that he wanted like Storm to be like abusing these children, and Aurora Monroe is the big scary villain. It's just like, thank God Marvel stepped in. And
Right.
it's very clear that the movie was like chopped to hell. Like you can just tell that the editing and pacing is a bit off. And I don't know what was cut, but with the little bit of racist stuff that made it in, I'm glad that it got cut up. So is it worth a watch? That's tough. The stuff that's bad in it is bad in like a real world way, and that's very upsetting. The stuff, with being like a New Mutants fan, the stuff that they did get right was cool to see, but if I had known going into it the issues there, I probably wouldn't have bothered watching it. Because the unfortunate stuff in there, the like upsetting stuff, like again, like I'm a white person, I don't necessarily understand the intricacies of the stuff that they got wrong, but even with my limited perspective, I can see the problematic stuff. And the ideas that this guy had about Storm too, it's just like wild that he would even like admit to it in interviews. It's like, why are you telling people this about yourself, man? Like, you should keep that private. Those are some bad ideas.
It doesn't make you sound cool. It's not as good as you think it is.
Yeah. Another show of clowns are going to clown themselves.
Yeah.
Right. Very true.
So that I thought was like a really like sad ending to the X-Men Fox movies. Like they really went out on a downer. When I thought Dark Phoenix was actually not a terrible ending. So
yeah, no, well, and yeah, I'd been characterizing it as for me the ending. I'm probably gonna go watch New Mutants after this, with low expectations. Because honestly, again,
we got lesbians. Like we got an interracial lesbian relationship. Like there is good stuff in there, and like they address Wolfsbane's like religious trauma spot on. They like, yeah, it's really inconsistent. The stuff that they got right is really cool, and the stuff that they got wrong, they got really wrong. But the cast for the most part does everything they can to try and salvage the movie, and like Anna Taylor-Joy is great when she's not saying like bad stuff about Native Americans. Like Maisie Williams is great when, in all of it. The actress who plays Danny is great. Yeah.
Trust me, I'm not going in with great expectations, but I realizing I have atrociously left something off the list.
Yeah.
I will follow up and let the NerdyVerse know where that stands. Clearly, I have weird opinions when it comes to X-Men movies anyway. I've got a very odd ranking.
I think your ranking makes sense. Like, I can understand, like, your perspective on the stuff you like and the stuff you don't.
Well, that makes me feel better.
Yeah.
Because, obviously, from my perspective, so often it just feels like I like what I like. I don't, it's just... But then again, it's a very hard, well, I don't like what I don't like, too. And I think for me, the things that dip do have their reasons, and in a lot of ways, while I get it, I'm just not there with I don't get it enough to forgive it in some ways with a lot of this stuff. But by and large, at least as far as the films have gotten, because that's just how far we were able to get with this tonight. But more works than doesn't for me, and I would encourage anyone to do what I did, and again, break it up into chunks and then just watch it. just
Mhm.
go back and revisit, because a lot of these are a lot older. I'm sure a lot of people, unless you really like them, haven't watched them recently, and also giving second fair shots to some of the more recent ones. I think it's due.
Yeah, I would agree. There's a couple movies that I think are real stinkers, but other than that, I think these are like really like middle of the road adaptation wise, and I think some of them rise above that and into being like good movies on their own. I do think all of the TV shows, by and large, are better than the movies
For
adaptation wise,
sure.
but I think the X-Men just lends itself better to TV
Mhm.
because Chris Claremont, who really made the X-Men what it is, inspired by and large how we view TV nowadays. So I
Mhm.
think, of course, TV just fits better for this format. But yeah, there's some bangers in there, and they're I think they're all worth revisiting, even the ones that I don't think are good.
Have we changed any of your opinions?
I've had fun listening to you guys talk about X. I'm gonna be
Clearly.
honest. Like,
Clearly.
if you guys were wondering why I've been so quiet for most of this, it's because I've been listening to some of the best podcasting I've ever heard.
Oh, well, you're
I'm
you're
very
generous to
flattered.
me.
Thank
You're
you.
accurate about Andy.
I'm just having fun.
Well,
I really love these characters and I really love these stories. And to Justice in the chat's point from like 2 hours ago, like representation is really important.
Yeah.
And by and large, X-Men has been the comic books representing minority stories.
mhm.
And there's something really powerful about that. And when there's a lot of people who are like, oh, well, it's not about minorities. It's just about anyone who feels like they're an outcast. And it's like, I think you're really missing the point.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the mutant metaphor is best on page when it's not just a metaphor. And what I mean
Mhm.
by that is like when Storm is interacting with the mutant metaphor, it's more powerful. When Iceman is interacting with the mutant metaphor, it's more powerful. When Kitty is interacting with it, it's more powerful because she's Jewish because Storm is black and because Iceman is gay. And the writers who get that and really push for diverse casts in X-Men books, they're some of the most powerful, most interesting stories out there in comics. And I'd highly encourage you to check out some of those books and some of those stories if you've enjoyed the movies. If you think the movies are pretty good, pick up a comic and see what you're missing out on. It can be overwhelming to know where to start, but there are some really easy points to jump on and start reading, and I think it's worth it.
Absolutely. And Andy, I'm going to volunteer your services that if anybody has any questions on their X journey, reach out to an actual expert.
My Twitter is there at a one hat town. Feel free to hit me up with X-Men thoughts, X-Men questions. There's some great X-Men podcasts out there that I really love. Jay and Miles Explain the X-Men and Cerebrocast are both great podcasts that deep dive these characters in really insightful and funny and interesting ways. And Adam Warrock, I'm just going to plug his music. He doesn't make music anymore, which is heartbreaking, but he has a bunch of like X-Men albums and songs, and they all freaking slap. So
Nice.
if you just like fun, nerdy music, check out him. I was listening to
Absolutely.
him all day to get ready for this. So
Or and also just hit up Andy if you just want to thank them for their awesomeness. And
Exactly.
because I mean, certainly sharing all of that with us, like the love that you have for X-Men, because to me it's an interesting topic, to you it's something meaningful, and that makes it more than just a topic to me. It makes it a conversation I really enjoyed having, um, because that is such a heart of what we like doing, is having those sort of like deep diving, meaningful conversations about why we love what we love, and what it says about us. Because I think that we all like what we like. And, even the person with the stupidest fandom opinion likes what they like for a reason, and maybe there's some stuff there. And I always think those are such interesting conversations to have and things to explore.
I even stuff that I don't think is particularly good, I love to try and go in and see like what did work. I mean, that's a big thing we do on Ending Pending when we talk about shows that got canceled at one season. No one sets out to make a show that gets canceled after one season.
Mm.
So there has to be good stuff there. There was intention behind what was made. And so even some of these X-Men movies, and I'm like, this one sucks. There's still like good nuggets in there that I can find joy in and go like, oh, you know, most of this movie might be hard for me to recognize the characters I love, but right there in that one scene, Cyclops, you know, reached for his visor in a way, and like that was dope. So
It's the MCU nugget. Sometimes all you need is a nugget.
yeah,
Sometimes you get a gold mine.
I know when the MCU does the X-Men, it's going to like stress me out really badly.
We're gonna have to have a revisit because I'm hella curious at what's gonna happen.
But I know
let Taika Waititi do it.
Maybe.
I know that even if I don't love it, there will be stuff that I enjoy, and it's going to bring new fans to these stories, and that is a big positive. So
Absolutely. Well, we're gonna have to have more X conversations in the future because we didn't cover everything. Certainly, which we never cover everything.
we went so
tried.
long, and I'm so sorry.
No, you were
don't be.
fine. Great conversation, great episode, and hey, people are gonna check it out, and I hope so. And hopefully, you also follow up with Andy. Check them out. With because you're also on Force Friends Rewatch
Mhm.
podcast as well. You've mentioned Ending Pending, and then again, your X services are out there for helping folks. If you want to get into X-Men, clearly there's at least a lot of fun to be had, if not all quality fun. But you know what? It's just a band and family of weirdos having a good time. Who's not into it? So give it a shot, give it a revisit, even. If nothing else, maybe we've convinced you of that. If you've liked the episode, make sure you let us know you've liked it. If you really liked it, share it with someone. Maybe share it with that one friend that thinks that X3 is the best X-Men movie out there.
They
Yeah.
exist, I'm sure.
We'll work on them. But yeah, share it. Let somebody know you liked it. It does a lot for the show, and we certainly enjoy it because we love having conversations like this. And so, looking forward to that. We return to Star Wars next week by chatting about the Bad Batch. We're revisiting season 1
Love that.
with our friends from Star Wars in a Galaxy podcast, and so that's going to be a good time. We've gotten teases of season 2 stuff from Celebration, so I'm sure we're going to have more to talk about here soon, and I'm sure the season will be this year. So
Sometime.
we want to prepare ourselves for that by revisiting that because we never really talked about Bad Batch, and I think it's pretty good. So come back next week for that. We're live every Friday, and so if you want to check it out live on Friday, great. If you're listening to this after the fact, thank you as well, and thanks to our patrons who pay. We blow our whole budget on guests. Andy, your check's in the mail.
Thank you.
It has been a blast, and we will catch up with everyone next week and look forward to having more nerdy conversations.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. You know, this is, excuse me, a damn fine cup of coffee.